Thank you. Questions of notice from members, David?
Not received either, Chair.
Thank you. Notice of motion?
Not received, Chair.
Okay, that brings us on to item number 7, which is a highways progress update from the Strategic Director of Places. Thank you, Penny.
Chair, can I just clarify that this is in relation to the current situation in highways that you wanted?
Yes.
An update? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, so just for the awareness of the committee, we've had, as most members will be aware, that we've had long-standing issues in highways in terms of resourcing and capacity, and very high expectations in terms of our residents and customers in terms of our ability to respond to queries, particularly around Fix My Streets, and an understanding in terms of the prioritisation and policies that we have in place in terms of how we prioritise highways issues and deal with them. We have two essentially, we had two systems in terms of dealing with particularly resident and community concerns. So we have Fix My Streets, where the routine issues around highways and environment get reported, and we strongly encourage members to ask residents to report in that way. I'll come back to that in a minute. And then we had a process which was called Highways Concerns process, which was for more in relation to traffic schemes that local parishes and communities would like to see implemented in their localities. We had done a process of reviewing highways concerns and had looked to implement a different arrangement which would enable us to manage demand. So where we had got to earlier this year, calendar year, was that the demand around the level of highways concerns was significant and without the capacity to process that. So in essence, we were creating failure demand by raising expectations in the community that we were not going to be in a position to fulfil. And what we wanted to do was move to a way of recognising parish requirements, but looking to build those into our annual capital programme process rather than have a separate standalone process for those. I think it's fair to say that since we've implemented Fix My Street, which has been around for some time now, it's a national system, we've seen demand in terms of level of concerns reported on there double. And as I say, there is quite often a mismatch in terms of expectation about how quickly we can respond to those issues as versus our sort of our planned maintenance approach. We recognise and have had for some time an improvement project around Fix My Streets in terms of how we could improve the responses that residents or whoever reports a concern gets, because that was certainly causing and does still cause issues in terms of the standard text in the response. So we've got, when a resident reports something on Fix My Street, it gets categorised, it gets coded, and there's about 100 of those codes that all have a different response attached to them. So that was the backdrop that we had in highways already, and a very, very lean team. I think I've said to you before that we've got, in essence, 9 staff in that team that manage the entirety of the highways network and our term maintenance contract, as well as structures, street lighting, drainage, and also provide our highways development control function and our act as the local flood risk authority. Again, you'll be aware on the back of the making a new local plan in the absence of a 5-year housing land supply, council agreed to put some additional resource into the highways development control function, because the increase in planning applications put also puts correlating demand into the highways team. The challenge with that was that we hadn't been able to recruit. So, and again, some members will be aware that over the last 3 years, we'd had 4 periods of maternity leave. So we've had a lot of interim support in, which causes, which is beneficial in terms of providing a service, but absolutely does cause issues in terms of continuity and difference in terms of approach. So that was a sort of backdrop in terms of the fact that as a highways service, we were already dealing with sort of considerable amount of pressure and issues, and looking at ways in which we could try and make those improvements, particularly around sort of customer communications. But overlaid with that, we've been undertaking the re-procurement of the highways term maintenance contract, which is a really significant contract for us. Over the course of, we've put out the specification is for a contractor that could be with us for up to 20 years. So it's the contract's structured. I think it's 10 plus 5 plus 5 is the way that we've structured it. So that's a really key contract for us. It does the majority of the maintenance of our network, and also manages our winter maintenance programme. And the estimated value of that, based on our current activity, would be anything up to an order of 70 million over that duration of that partnership. So it's a really significant contract for the council, and therefore has taken a correlating amount of time to progress with that. So to sort of paint a backdrop really of a service that was under considerable pressure, but then we've had 3 resignations or people move on. So our 2 highways inspectors, of which we only had 2, have recently left, and our one of 2 highways engineers left last week for a new role, and we've had another highways engineer who's had periods of sickness. So we've again significant gaps, and it's a service where every individual is essentially at risk of being a single point failure. And overlaid with that, we've also seen a significant increase in the amount of streetworks activity. So that's utility companies, Openreach and others digging up the roads, which again has led to an increase in demand. So all of that backdrop has led to us essentially calling a sort of a business continuity incident, if you like, in terms of the situation where we are with highways at this point in time, and the need for some immediate remedial action. So we have looked to bring in interims immediately into covering the highways inspector roles. We have been successful in covering 2. We're seeking to get a 3rd, but we've had interim start and then go. And this reflects a national backdrop around highways services, and similarly across other technical service areas in local government. They are very difficult to recruit to. So and some of the feedback, which again I know members are very familiar with, is that in Rutland, your job is broad and it is deep, and many people come and find that quite different to their experience elsewhere, where they're sort of in a specialist team. Here you have to pick up quite a lot across the board, and also for bigger authorities, some of the feedback we had was around the vehicle provision that we've got. So at the moment for our inspectors, we have temporary livery on the pool cars, whereas in bigger authorities they have dedicated highways fleets that is called Chapter 8 compliance. So sort of full safety vehicles. And again, that's been some of the sort of feedback from the interims that we have had in. And then what we've done with the Highways Development Control interims that we've had for a period of time now, their contracts were due to come to an end in September. Agreed to extend those development control interims for another 6 months to give us that sort of continuity of service, particularly with one of the highways engineers who covered both highways DC and the highways engineering leave. We are looking at improvements to Fix My Streets and as I say, the commentary we've worked, the team have liaised with Buckinghamshire County Council who have done an awful lot of work around Fix My Streets and have got a Bible in terms of customer responses and so that remains an ongoing piece of work. However, at the moment, the priority has got to be maintaining the service. So what we have discussed with the portfolio holder and colleagues is that we will look to particularly around highways concerns, essentially pause the process for now, and we're just looking at how we might do that. So the proposal, I think, currently is that we'll stop taking any concerns for now, but we will open a window early in the new year where we will invite any concerns from parishes, close that window, and then propose a later window by which they will then be assessed and incorporated into the programme. So the changes that we've made earlier in the year were around the categorisation of those highways concerns and looking to identify, categorise them from essential through to what we call amenities, so that they're nice to have, but not something that we would necessarily prioritise in terms of a requirement for health and safety on the highways network, and we will continue to sort of apply that process. So I guess in summary, that the situation is that we have to prioritise the safety of the highways network. That is up front and centre, and in doing so, we are prioritising the recruitment of staff, because that is our weakness. I am very clear we are in sticking plaster mode at the moment, to give us the sort of stability to be able to look at more fundamental changes around how we provide the service in the future. We are due to come to council in November for award of the new term maintenance contract. Subject to council approval, we will then have 6 months to mobilise the new contract, and that actually will prove to be quite a helpful time in terms of looking at this sort of the whole customer journey, because that will play into how we want to set the new contract up from day one in order to be able to provide, you know, a good customer service to our residents and our communities. I will be clear though, we will never provide the level of service or meet the expectation that some of our residents have around our service. And I think the other point I'd like to make for some of the new members is we have, for the last couple of years, participated in the National Highways Customer Satisfaction Survey. That is an independent survey. It's objectively measured, and most highways authorities in the country participate in that survey. Our highway service has consistently come out as top quartile, and in fact, on some measures, fifth in the country in terms of highway service. So there is something we need to do to improve the way that we manage expectations and that sort of communication with residents. And the final point is to say that next week and the following week, I'm bringing in an organisation called the Future Highways Research Group. which is it's a membership-based organisation that we've just signed up to. It's based out of the University of Cranfield, and it's a peer support academic research group linked to the Association of Directors for Environment, Place and Transport. So it's a well-renowned academic research group that provides peer support across the subhighways and transport sector. What they offer is a value for money benchmarking exercise, and so they are going to come in over the next couple of weeks and work with us to undertake that benchmarking exercise, so that we'll understand and have a good sense of how not just how we perform as a highways authority by comparison to others, but where some of our issues or opportunities lie, and flowing out of that will be a scope. Well, we will work with them then to develop a further improvement plan that will embed some of what we're having to do immediately in the short term.
Thanks very much for that update, Penny. Committee, do you have any questions for Penny, please? Councillor Ross.
Could I sympathise with the difficulties that you have. Could I ask if the wage structure for technical grades, because it's been a long-standing problem in the UK, hasn't it? Recruiting engineering skills, whether it be in business or in local authorities. Do we know that the bands that we have for the grades are competitive? Thank you.
So we, as Rutland County Council, we're on the sort of national pay arrangements. So that we are at a disadvantage, let me put it that way, to those authorities that have local pay schemes, because they are able to pay more. And actually our competition is the private sector. So the reason that we're full of interims and we're not dissimilar to any other local authority is because actually an awful lot of those technical staff that were in local government have moved into the interim market, because they can command a significantly greater day rate. We're paying twice what we would, our day rate for our interims is twice what we would pay to a member of staff. So it's a real challenge for the sector, and we are looking at ways around that, and we've been very successful in terms of looking at growing our own, but obviously that they can move on as well. So yeah, it's a huge challenge. It is being looked at nationally. I know, talking through this Future Highways Research Group, again, I think it's, don't quote me on the names, but it's something, I think it's Derbyshire have got about 70% of their highways workforce is interim, and Worcestershire's about 80%. So and this will be the value of the benchmarking exercise as well. I think it will confirm that we're not unusual.
Okay. Any more questions, Councillor Powell?
Thank you, Penny. And yeah, it's a real difficult situation. But just really, obviously, you mentioned, and we all agree, obviously, that highway safety is the key priority. But you've mentioned that we are down on staff. We all know that recruitment takes a while, and even though we've got interim. So you mentioned also that there was a different prioritisation on the highways concern, which is one very small aspect. But how, taking that aside, that's not going to solve the problem. How, in this interim period with less staff, even though we've got some interims, are we going to make sure that our highway safety is maintained?
So that's the reason that we've prioritised the interims and recruitment of the inspectors, because they are the eyes and ears in terms of making sure that we are safe on the highways network, and then they are able, they issue the works instructions to tarmac. So we in terms of actually taking action on the highway, we haven't got any issues with the contractor. That's, that we're still able to do that, and we have covered the highways inspector roles at the moment. obviously they don't know the network as well as our previous inspectors did, but in terms of covering those sort of key safety risks, we have got the resource to do that.
Councillor West.
Thanks, Chair. What we need is some. One of the benefits of being Rutland, a nice small county, is that we can probably attract people, should we say, coming towards the end of their careers that don't want to work on a motorway anymore, or major A roads, and they want to just come and settle somewhere a little bit nicer and hopefully stay. And that's always nice, but it's hard to find those people. My main question was going to be around Fix My Street. So we've stopped taking concerns now, which is good. So we've had Fix My Street on the go for a while. Do we feel that we opened a can of worms there, letting people comment? And I feel that with feedback I get whenever I attend Market Overton Parish Council, I have one particular culprit who I know is a regular user of Fix My Street, and I try to dissuade him from registering every single what he feels to be a concern. And is it possible that we could move away from this altogether, do you think, and go back to a structure of taking concerns? And I like the idea of taking them quarterly or something like that. Have a window, you register your concerns, we'll deal with them, then the next window opens in 3 months, and then we'll deal with those. Is that something that you think the department could manage a lot better? Would that be a better model?
With hindsight, I think we've opened a Pandora's box, is what I think. Fix My Streets has, as I said, massively increased the demand on the number of queries and reports that the service gets and has to deal with. It's clearly got its benefits, because we do get we do get the intelligence and the reports around issues on the highways network, and that's of real value. We have talked about, actually, is an option to stop Fix My Streets. The issue being that it's a national system, so even if we stop it locally, people could potentially still report on the national system, and then we wouldn't have visibility of that. So it's certainly something that we ought to give consideration to, but I think we probably have sort of the horses bolted to some degree on that one, and what we need to do is find a way of making it work for us. But at the moment, Fix My Streets is driving us, not us driving Fix My Streets.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, a couple of questions and points. First of all, it is an utter nightmare, and I think the public expectation in some way does need to be managed on that, and also coupled with that an understanding of what a safe network is. So actually making sure that we are investing that capital money really well on an annual programme is done with inspections rather than the public helpfully giving their 2 pennies worth, although it is very important. Obviously, I'm aware I'm in a public meeting. On that point, I'm assuming with all of that, there will be a communications plan, and I do think there has to fall something onto members. We stand for election, we make all sorts of helpful pledges, which I would suggest with highways, we are cutting our cloth to suit. With Fix My Street, if I recollect, there was an issue in terms of the actual software talking between the public interface and our systems. Are we investing in that? Because that does feel as though that value between officer time honking through the Fix My Street bit and can a computer do it was one question. Second question, are you confident that the backlog will actually be cleared from the Highways Transport Working Group, as was by January? Is that a realistic date? I think the principle of chunking it up is right, but is January realistic? And the final is a point that the recruitment for decent highways folk seems to be, has been going on forever. Hopefully the Future Highways Research Group will come equipped with a magic wand, but I fear that the solution actually boils down to cash, which I don't think we have. That's a miserable end to my comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, councillors.
Yeah, so I think there is a longer term project that we need around Fix My Streets. And again, as I say, that whilst that will be a challenge to manage at the same time as mobilising a new contract, that is the sensible time to be looking to do that. And I think we would benefit from bringing in some extra support to help us with that, and certainly looking at doing that. Communications, you're absolutely right, is key, and we're just going to sort of subject to approval of sign off on the key messages, then we would look to put something into the member bulletin, advising members of that, and then putting in the appropriate communications to help the public understand the situation. Do I think we've cleared the backlog by January? No, I don't think we will have done. So we do need to sort of look at the timings of those windows, and money. So it's more than money. And going back to Councillor Ross's question, money helps, but the advantages of Rutland are you do get the opportunity to have a really broad role and to learn areas of business that you might not in other authorities. In fact, we were just having that conversation earlier today. So one of our colleagues who's just moving to Leicestershire will be very narrow in their focus now, and not have the same opportunity around working across all of the different elements of a highway service. The flip side of that is that there's a lot of demands on individuals, and whilst we have a good quality network, it's not quite as exciting as an inner city network that's got multiple roundabouts, multiple bridges, multiple structures. So there are, there's it's making the most of what we have on offer. I think we are going to have to look at market factor supplements in terms of salaries. And we're definitely going to need to look at a longer term workforce plan around, but it's grow your own. The issue with growing your own is you need the experienced people to mentor and coach. But that might be the opportunity with the Future Highways Research Group as well, in terms of there might be an ability to share that mentoring across a number of authorities, because as I say, everybody else is struggling with the same challenges as well.
Thank you
Councillor
very
Payne,
much.
sorry.
Just a question for my own interest. You say Fix My Street is a national programme. Do we pay to be in it?
I can't remember the exact figure at the moment. And we so you can pay different levels. Andrew might actually know. I've got in mind. I've got a feeling it's like £15,000, but it don't. I can come back to you on that, because I may be completely misleading you. But you can buy different levels of support through the system. I think that was your other point. Was there was an issue between the interface with Fix My Street. So we have three systems that Fix My Street reporting, customer facing reporting system. Salesforce is our customer services CRM system, so database customer relationship management, and then our back office system is Confirm. And there was where there were the issues in particular with the interface was between Salesforce and Confirm, and Fix My Streets and Salesforce. The team have done a lot of work to try and work through those issues, but there are some that remain, and Andy Nixon colleagues are liaising as part of this business continuity situation with the company that operates Fix My Streets, to see if there's further improvements that can be made. Just in relation to the new contract, we have specified we've specified that we use confirm and that we would anticipate that that remains the situation, certainly in year one of the new contract. But we have built within the spec the ability for the contractor to recommend a different back office system that may or may not have better integration. But they would need to make the case for that, and we'd look at that at that point in time.
Councillor Edwards, did you want to?
Yes, no, I'm sorry, I'm confused at the moment. No, it was just about the paying for it. The problem is, even if we are paying for Fix My Street and we choose not to, it's still there. And the problem is that we've been for the last, well, since I've been here, which isn't that long, whenever I've come to Highways with an issue, the response has been, tell them to use Fix My Street. And the people would never have known that it was a thing, and now they do. And even if we are not subscribed to them, they're still going to be putting them in. Yeah, because all you do is you put in your postcode and you got it. So we can't just make it go away. It'll just make us look really bad, because it'll look like we're not responding, because it's advertised as a way to get easy contact to your council.
I think Councillor Stevenson's got a point she wants to add to that.
Yeah, just on, so Cambridge City isn't a member of Fix My Street, because I helpfully directed some friends there, and what actually flashes up is a really sorry to inform you, but your council is not a member of Fix My Street. So it does get, it's not a case of you think you've reported it. That was a couple of years ago. It could have changed, but as I say, Cambridge City isn't, and it helpfully tells you when you put in the postcode on Fix My Street.
Thank you. I'm conscious we're getting a bit bogged down in Fix My Street, and could we move on, because we've got quite a lot to go on the agenda, but we've got two burning questions and then I think we need to wrap it up. Thanks.
Very quickly. I think in terms of the backlog, from the perspective of new recruits, it's critically important that we actually don't throw a whole lot of people are not submerged in a pile of work if we envisage them being permanent. I also think that the Rutland Times article advising that we had 50 vacancies in the council, but 2 weeks ago, is a key message. We are struggling to recruit key skills, not just in highways, which I appreciate is a subject of discussion tonight. So in terms of setting, we need to make a change. There is an issue of recruitment that we're faced with in providing services. Thank you.
And I think that appears on the risk register, on the strategic risk register. Yep.
If I,
Count-
sorry, just
carry
if
on.
I just may, yeah, it's very much a strategic risk for places. So at the moment, within places, I'm carrying a 20% vacancy rate across the directorate. It is lumpy in places and it is significant in highways, but across the directorate, that is a big capacity gap for us.
Councillor Powell, last question.
So it wasn't a question, it was a comment coming back
Okay.
to communications, which I think is the key thing in Fix My Street, because I think actually as a system it works, but it's how we communicate what we're going to do with those queries. Just on, you said the communications on what highways are doing priority wise will come out in a members. Could we maybe have some pictures? Because it's fine, we talk about what is a priority, what is a safety priority, what isn't, and everyone has their own ideas. I think it'd be really useful if we could see and share with residents what makes a highway safe and what are the things we're really focusing on in real examples. I don't know how possible that might be, but just a suggestion that actually might help us as members to get out those messages, because everyone thinks a different priority. Thank you.
Thanks, Penny. The query for me was over communications, and I think it's just vitally important, because we can support you, members can support you in getting through what we're going through at the moment, but I feel that we don't understand enough about it, which is your point. So as soon as you can communicate to us, I think it'd be really beneficial to communicate to parish councils as well, and take some of the noise away from you.
Yeah, so which and completely the communication plan is going to be key. I mean, one of the things that I was just talking about earlier today is, and given the immediate pressure on the team, it won't be now, but I do think there might be some merit in doing a bit of a show and tell for members around a bit of a tour around our highways network, actually. But,
Thanks very much for that. I think we need to move on now. Thanks. Okay. I think so. Sorry, Penny, a little bit longer. Item 8 is from the last meeting. We just wanted to understand the governance framework around the Levelling Up Fund, and I think Penny and Kirsty are due to present that.
yeah, so you'll be aware that obviously from award of Levelling Up Fund, we had to articulate within the bid the governance arrangements that we would put in place in order to manage that fund, both as an accountable body, so across Rutland and Melton, and then for our own Rutland Luff programme. We have made sure that the governance arrangements align with the corporate governance framework. So we have an oversight board which sits across Rutland and Melton with the leaders, portfolio holders, Section 151 officers, chief executives, and then a delivery board, and then a structure below that, which is project teams for each of those key elements of the programme. So that has been approved by the Love Governance Board as the responsible body for in terms of DLUC for managing and delivering the Love programme, and then has subsequently been endorsed by Cabinet. So I'm not sure that I've got anything more to add, but Kirsty may well want to, as the Section 151 officer who has to sign her name on the bottom of the quarterly returns.
Thanks, Kirsty.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. So as the accountable body for this grant award, the responsibility does fall to me as the council's Section 151 for signing off the works and the timescales that we're working to in the delivery. And then also what's planned going forward. It also involves linking in with Melton for that information. So DLUC are very prescriptive about the format that we provide that with. There is an expectation, it's called the Flood First Line of Defence document as well, that we're bound to provide as well. And consequently, we'll touch on it later, but it does link in with later in the agenda with some work internal audit are looking at with the Love programme as well. So these documents, as Penny's outlined, as the governance and how the council is operating, and I'm able to place the confidence when I come to sign off the relevant returns as well.
Committee members, there's lots in the document for you to look at around that framework. Councillor Stevenson.
So I'm not sure if I'm about to ask a question that shouldn't be in public session. Shall I write it down and pass it to you? And then just carry on.
Okay.
It was about staffing. Yeah, okay, could I, sorry to be an absolute pain, but I think it is quite a crucial question. If it turns out not to be, I apologise. Could I propose that we just move very briefly into private session so I can ask a question that I'm not sure if it's exempt?
Do I have a seconder, please?
Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you. to vote on that? No. We're live again, committee. And any more questions, please? Councillor Ross.
I've got a question, but I'll cover it in the internal audit. Just one observation. Are we capturing the direct costs of all the temporary labour that we actually have in any year? I appreciate there's also an indirect impact in terms of labour turnover, but it seems that we may have quite a large bill. Thank you.
Is that just in connection with this agenda item or just broad question?
It was a broad question based upon what Councillor Stevenson had just.
It's probably one more suited to the Employment and Appeals Committee, I would have thought.
Right.
Yeah, if we can take it forward to that committee. It's meeting on the 10th of October, I think. Yeah. Sorry.
Chair, it's probably one that that we can take away on this side of the table and provide a response separately. But as you say, it's not linked to any specific agenda item this evening, so it doesn't naturally fit with the business of this committee this evening.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Ross? Okay, thank you. Any more questions? No, okay, then we'll move on to item number 9, which is the Information Governance Annual Report for 22-23 from the Monitoring Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Under the umbrella of the Information Governance Annual Report, we are making members aware of our activity and performance in a number of disparate spheres. So under the information governance heading, we talk to you about the performance on responses to freedom of information requests, as well as the number and volume that we have received over the year. I should say also that the whole of this report relates to the period from the 1st of April 2022 to the 31st of March 2023, and we have visualized for you as well in the appendix the metrics that we're reporting against, and we give you the comparison with last year as well, so that you can track our progress or just track our performance year on year. So as I say, under the heading of information governance, we've got freedom of information requests, and linked to that environmental information requests, along with data subject access requests. Then over and above that, we talk about the complaints, comments and compliments that we have received over the year. And as you will see, members, we draw learning from each of those categories and establish the extent to which best practice in one area might be transposable to another area of the authority. Likewise, any of the lessons that we can learn from complaints, whether or not those practices which we are going to improve in one area, likewise we could replicate across the organisation. We also report to you on the usage of our powers of covert surveillance under RIPA, and as in previous years, this council hasn't utilised those powers at all. We haven't engaged in any covert surveillance. And we also report on the number of complaints that have been taken to the local government ombudsman, and the number of those which have been upheld. I appreciate that there is quite a lot of information contained within the report. I know, members, you will have had an opportunity to read and digest what we've brought to you, and I'm happy to take any questions this evening, Chair. So, excuse me, it's been a long day. I'm happy to field any questions that members may have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members? Councillor Stevenson?
Sorry, just to comment, I thought it was incredibly thorough, and I think it's really helpful to see what has been learnt from complaints or compliments, etc. So I thought, because I mean, it's one thing simply saying, oh, we've had this number and this blah 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 and we've been compliant. What is far more important for an organisation is actually learning from that. So hopefully we'll see those numbers decrease in that particular area.
Councillor Edwards.
Just in terms of the sorry, I scrolled down. The email breaches, data breaches. Is there not a way to make it a default that you don't copy in everybody? Because I'm pretty sure that that is an option that can be placed like account wide.
You're quite right. It can be implemented as an option account wide. What we tend to do here is in cases where people have come up against difficulties in their usage of either blind copying or copy to all, for each of those individuals, that option is removed. So by default, they are not able to pre-populate. And the same goes to auto-populate as well, even if you're sending it to one individual recipient. If it has been the case that somebody has inadvertently started to automatically populate, using letters AN, and it's populated Andrew instead of Angela, and the email has been sent, then that is deactivated as well on a case-by-case basis. But then at the same time, the Information Governance Coordinator circulates a warning and a message across the organisation, just reminding people that they need to take care and to take those precautions for themselves.
Okay with that?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking that rather than having it happen and then having to warn somebody, that it would be better to have it not as an option unless you really, really wanted to. But if it works, it works. But it seems to have not. That was all.
Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Powell.
Thank you. One question and one just clarification. In terms of, I think it was very informative, all the graphs. Obviously, it looked like just generally the numbers of complaints and compliments have remained quite steady. Are we seeing any differences in the way these are coming to us? Is there any in terms of the mechanics? Do we feel that that's a user-friendly way of people reporting in, or are there any other sort of trends coming out of those raw numbers? I shall ask my other question. The other question was in the report, it says, and it may be I've misunderstood this, the statistics were recorded prior to the establishment of the current directorates and therefore reflect the previous structure. I wasn't aware that we'd had a change in our directorates. We may have had change in personnel, but have we actually had a change in directorates? Shall
I take that one first?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. So in the past, we had, for example, a people directorate, a resources directorate, places directorate. What we now have is we have five rather than three. So we have adults, children's, resources, law and governance, and places. And although that has been the case for some while, and I can see your look of bafflement, Councillor Powell, because you're thinking this is not news, but it was still very much the case that people were reporting against those previous directorates, and there was an extent to which the budgets were still very, very much interlinked. So Kirsty and Andrew have done a lot of work on that over recent months, and we've worked as well to just remind people that we have got 5 directorates. There are 5 strategic directors, and each of us have our own individual directorate. But the way that things were getting captured within the organisation harked back to the previous 3 or combined directorates that used to be in place.
Okay, I understand that. That is a bit baffling for members here who thought we've had 5 directorates for quite a long time and were not aware that are there any other areas where was this an anomaly? I'm just a bit
I mean,
confused about why.
Yeah, it does predate me starting at the council, because obviously I'm, along with Kirsty, I'm one of those 5, and we very much have our own individual directorates. So as I say, we have reinforced that, and that has come from the top. So our chief executive has been very, very keen to address those. I think it just goes back to past custom and practice. That's all I can say, really. And then on the other one, forgive me, what was your first point?
It was about any trends in
yes,
complaints.
and also the front door in, I think you're asking about.
It tends to be the case that the complaints, the corporate complaints that get captured in this report would be the ones that come in through the let us know email account, or I think sometimes they do come into service areas and then people know to send them through to the information governance team who have that corporate responsibility. I'm not close enough to know what sort of trends have been identified, but I do know that those sorts of bits of data are reported back to the directorates on a very regular basis in order that they can make that analysis for themselves. So the intention is that this is something, it's live information that people can then act upon. So, for example, I do know that it's pulled out in the report that there were a significant number of comments that came in on the subject of Catmos Leisure Centre, and that's recorded. So I'm fairly confident that that sort of work is going on. But as I say, I'm not close enough to the directorate level detail.
Any more questions, committee? No? Thank you very much. Thanks. We'll move on to the next item then, which is the internal audit update from our internal auditor. Thanks,
Thank you.
Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the latest update on the delivery of the internal audit activity for 23-24. So as usual, there's a full copy of the update report provided for you from pages 77 of tonight's papers. So there's a copy of the current year's internal audit plan on pages 80 to 82 of the papers. So that provides each of the assignments, the latest position as at producing this report, and the outcomes of any of those that have been finalised. So since the last committee meeting, we have completed a further 3 of our audit assignments. We are on track in terms of delivery, just to mention, as we near the halfway point of the financial year. So obviously that's reflected within the audit plan, and it's an ongoing piece of work. Obviously they continue to make progress on each of these assignments. So of the 3 audits that have been finalised since the last meeting, 2 related to some of the larger audits within the audit plan, and one of those related to a verification of a grant submission, which was in relation to disabled facilities grant. So that was signed off and submitted ahead of the deadline. The other 2 audits, obviously members have access to full copies of the audit reports. Just to mention briefly some of the key sections. So we had the quality assurance in children's social care. So here we're really looking at quality assurance as how we're monitoring and measuring practice and performance across the service, how we're identifying areas for improvement and acting upon feedback that we receive as well. So upon completing this audit, there was a new role completed of service manager for quality assurance, showing that the council is putting some emphasis in this area, and has recently introduced a quality assurance framework. So that put us in a good place to conduct the audit work. So we were able to see, as part of the testing, a range of quantitative and qualitative quality assurance activities in place, and those were suitably evidenced. What we did find, and the reason that we've given a moderate assurance opinion on this overall, is that a lot of those needed further formalising within that framework to make sure they were suitably documented. We wanted to see a little bit of clarification around roles and responsibilities in relation to some of those. And the quarterly quality assurance processes which have been established seem to be operating well. But we just wanted to see a bit of a tightening up of actions that are coming out of those as well, so that we've got some clear audit trail in relation to findings and what happens, and having some smart objectives around addressing those going forward. And we also wanted to see a formalisation of a training plan within this area as well. So based on that, we've given a moderate assurance for both the design of the controls and the compliance as at the time of the audit. And there's obviously an action plan in place to take some of those areas forward that I've mentioned. The second was around adult safeguarding. So they're 2 very much people-based audits that we've conducted early in the year. This was really focusing on the crucial area around handling of safeguarding concerns that come into the council. And this is not just those in the community, but also those with registered providers. So there's slightly different processes in place for those. So we wanted to get assurance around both of those areas. But we also wanted to look at how we're embedding awareness of safeguarding as well, so people know what to do if they have concerns, and how we're working with partners in promoting that as well. So overall, we were happy. We were pleased to see the collaboration that takes place between the council as part of the Safeguarding Adults Board, which seems to be working really well, and proactive work with partners to raise awareness around public campaigns, how we should be safeguarding adults. and when we did the testing on the handling of safeguarding concerns, generally we're able to give some assurance, but we did find that there was a need to improve consistency around record keeping in particular. So quite similar to the other audit really in terms of formalising record keeping in some of these cases, and making sure that we have audit trails around regular case reviews and updates as well, just so this is all documented and we've got that robust audit plan in these areas. And again, similarly with the other one, we identified there was a need for formalising of a training plan as well, just so we've got a bit of a matrix of what training people should have, and then we can monitor against that in practice. So on this one, we've given a good assurance opinion on the design of the controls and a moderate assurance over the compliance, mainly due to that lack of recording in some cases on the audit testing. So also within the report is an update on the implementation of audit recommendations. So on page 85 of the pack, there is an overview of the implementation. So we can see that 20 actions were implemented, which included 1 high priority action. We currently have 21 actions which are overdue as at the time of producing this report. So at the moment, we have 2 that fall into that category of being high priority and over 3 months overdue. So I have given the committee full copies, details of those 2 actions on pages 86 and 87 of your papers. Both of the actions relate to the same audit, which was in relation to asset management. And there is some linkage there really in terms of the implementation of this new system to manage tenancy records. So I've provided you with the latest updates that I've received in the status update column and the revised date, which was the end of September. So obviously hopeful that we will see some progress and we may be able to conclude those actions before the next committee meeting. And we'll obviously continue to follow up on a monthly basis. So that's a quick run through of where we are. There is also an additional recommendation within the report this evening in relation to a suggested amendment to the audit coverage. So we had a paper earlier this evening around the Levelling Up Fund, and I think it's an area that we really need to make sure we have some internal audit activity on. It's a key area we need some assurance. I am very conscious there is quite a clear regimented assurance framework in place already, so we don't want to duplicate with that. So we wanted to have that initial piece of work to make sure we could understand what assurances will be in place already, so we can complement that with the work that we deliver. I am also the Chief Internal Auditor for Melton Borough Council, so that's quite helpful in that we can work together. So we are looking to do some joint work on that as well, and hopefully achieve some efficiencies for you in that respect as well, looking at the full programme. So what I'm proposing we do, and I have had discussions with key officers at both of the councils, is ideally to do a little bit of joint work to start with around the key governance and what's underpinning this programme in terms of the governance arrangements, and also the robustness of that first line of defence that Kirsty mentioned earlier. So around the forecasting of financial spend and the spend reporting. We don't want to get to a point later in the programme where we're not able to track spend and it's all over the place. We want to make sure that coding structure is set up from the outset, so we're very clear on what's being coded against the grant spend. So we're looking to do that initial piece of work that would be reporting to both yourselves and to Melton, as it's a programme-wide initial piece of work. And we're currently agreeing the scope of that actually with officers if that was to go ahead. And then what we would like to do later in the year is some specific Rutland work around assurances around your actual project deliveries, around some of the key risks and the management of issues and risks in relation to projects from a Rutland perspective, and also anything that you need to get back from Melton as well, obviously from your assurances there. So that would then be dedicated reports to you around the further delivery stages. So that's how I see this working. When we developed the audit plan, we didn't include any days for this. Obviously, it was early days and we weren't sure what the assurance requirements were going to be externally, so we're waiting to see. So we do need to make an amendment to the audit plan in light of that if we are going to include that work. So what I've suggested, because also since the last meeting we have then received the outcomes of the latest Ofsted inspection on the special educational needs and disabilities inspection. That's quite a robust audit process by an external party. So I think actually there's not a great deal of value in it in us doing an internal audit this year. So what I would suggest is that we postpone that planned audit on SCND and look to include that in our audit planning for next year, where we could potentially look at the outcomes of any action plans from the Ofsted inspection, give that a little bit more time to move on and not audit the service again within the same year, and then reallocate those days to some work on the Levelling Up Fund. So that is recommendation 2. So hopefully that provides some context, but I'm happy to take questions from members on anything specific.
Thank you, Rachel. Committee, any questions for Rachel? Councillor Powell.
I don't have a question, more a sort of thought for this committee in terms of the high priority audit recommendations and the implementation dates. It really concerns me from this committee that internal audit does all their work, works with the officers, agrees what needs to be done, they understand it, they set a time, and then there are some of them that slip. And this has slipped a year. We all appreciate the reasons, but it very concerns me that that high priority audit recommendation isn't translated through to delivery. And I don't know if there's any recommendation message from the audit committee, because we have seen this before. And I'm sorry, I appreciate the issues, but if it's something that everyone's signed up to, I just cannot understand why it isn't delivered if it's all agreed. So I don't know if there's whether that's my view. I don't know if other members would agree with me, but I do find that concerning, having an internal audit function. And there maybe need to be changes to some of the recommendations as things progress, but I don't know if that's a proposal or that is the comment I would like to be minuted, or a recommendation from this committee that they are treated as the high priority issues that they should be.
This committee can make a recommendation to Cabinet, I understand, if that's what you want to do.
But through you, Chair, apologies.
Councillor Stevenson.
Sorry. I think Councillor Powell is a recommendation around setting realistic times so that we're not over promising and under delivering.
Is that a recommendation you want this committee to make to Cabinet?
Yes, I propose that we make a recommendation that reports from internal audit where there are agreed deliveries, especially on all priorities, but especially on high priority areas, that a realistic time is set and those delivery dates are met.
And you're proposing?
I'm proposing that.
Do I have a second?
You could probably phrase it a bit better, but I'm proposing that.
Councillor Stevenson. All those in favour?
Yeah. That's unanimous, Chair. If you could just need to confirm the wording specifically so I can then obviously record it.
Do you need that now?
So I can have that later.
Later.
Can I work on my wording a bit later?
CC then, if you like, Councillor Powell.
Thank you.
Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to 100% agree about accepting the external SEND audit and not putting the people through another audit, because I think that might actually be tantamount to cruelty. So, and I don't think we want to get the best
Councillor Payne?
cruel.
Thank you for your observation. That's great. Councillor Ross.
I'm extremely supportive of the proposed work on the levelling up bid. Just a couple of observations I wanted to make. I think it's important that the granularity of information that's actually reviewed is not simply financial. I think that is inadequate. And I think my other points are far too specific for the purposes of this meeting, and perhaps we'll come to them at a later date. But I do think that there needs to be some focus on leading indicators on spend and activity that we need to focus on, and that is not financial. Thank you.
Sorry, Rachel, yes.
And just come back on that, Chair. So yes, that obviously take that on board, and I think that's absolutely what we'd be looking to do. Obviously, we mentioned this first line of defence, which is very much around some of that those financial controls. So I think we want to make sure we're complementing that and looking at the wider delivery. We will be wanting to look at how risks are being managed. A big part of what I want to look at initially is the governance arrangements and understanding that back-to-back arrangement and how that's all covered to make sure that we've got that robust reporting arrangement. And assurance over the information that's going through those work streams as well. So that certainly wouldn't be limited to financial.
Just a point of clarification. It was very much thinking about things, not so much as a client, but as a contractor in terms of the information that we call forward from the people that are actually executing the work on our behalf. That I think that's what I was wanting to get across.
Sorry,
Yes,
thanks,
Rachel,
and just to
sorry.
add to that as well, and I completely agree. And just to add to it as well, in terms of the context, I think when I've had conversations with both Rutland and with Melton Borough Council, I think one of the things that members at both councils have been particularly interested in is how we actually evidence the benefits of this as well. So we're not just saying we've delivered it, ticked a box. What actually are we getting out of this? What are the benefits that are being realised? And I think that's the bigger part of this audit, and where we want to get that assurance and comfort as well. So hopefully that ties in with what you're looking for.
Okay, committee, any more? Councillor Edwards, sorry.
It was just on that point, just to say, I've got a lot of people that I know who the S&D stuff is going to be huge for them. And when you get all of those lovely comments saying, you know, the compliments, just publishing some of those somewhere would be just amazing, because we're not just saying, hey, we did it. We're saying, hey, we did it, and here is how it affected somebody's life. And that was just, I don't know.
That's a good comment, probably one to go to the portfolio holder, I would have thought. Yeah. Councillor West.
Just briefly, the two areas where you provided medium assurance are presumably largely down to the fact that we are struggling for recruitment.
Through you, Chair, I think probably there's an element of that. I think it's around just developing some of those systems as well. I think it's making best use of some of the software they've got in place as well. So potentially not just in terms of record keeping, but also making some efficiencies as well around that. So I think it's always part of the issue. And I work with a number of councils, and I think across the board where we're seeing compliance issues at the moment, there is at least an element of it down to staffing, and that's in all service areas, and that's in all areas. So yes, it's possibly a part of that.
Any more from the floor? No. Right, so the committee notes the internal audit update report in Appendix A, and then approves an amendment to the internal audit plan 2023-24 to postpone the planned audit of special educational needs and disabilities, and reallocates the 15 days to assurance work on the Levelling Up Fund programme. Please could I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor West, Councillor Stevenson. All those in favour?
Chairman, I obviously want to include the additional recommendation on top of those 2 days from Councillor Powell.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. We voted on that separately.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
propose the recommendation, I just need to vote on.
Yes.
So you proposed to add an additional recommendation, so we now need to vote as the final recommendations
Oh right.
in the report. If it's number 3, it's to be
Number
3
3.
recommendations now instead of 2.
3. Can I
Understand?
yeah, I understand. but do I need to read out the whole recommendation?
That's what I was asking for. If once we get the wording,
Okay.
and then I can have it noted in the minutes, and then I'll obviously go forward with that recommendation to cabinet. But if you want to put me in an email, obviously I can send you what I've put down in my notes, and if you're happy with it or not.
Yes. Yes. So,
I
okay.
was just wording it, but then I was also paying attention to what we were
So if
debating.
you contact me tomorrow, Councillor Powell, then we can confirm it.
So okay.
Yes,
Okay.
that's fine.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So we move on to item 11, which is a verbal update on the statement of accounts from Kirsty and Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we have 2 sets of accounts on the go at present. The 21-22 accounts and the 22-23 accounts for the most recent year just passed. So for the 2021-22 accounts, things have moved at a pace quite recently, and I'm looking at Paul from Grant Thornton as well. So they are completed, and there is a draft audit findings report available, and it came too late for governance purposes to come to this committee. So we are due to bring that with an extra committee in October. So that is great news. As you'll recall, we have had delays that have been caused initially through some of our valuations work, but then additional issues that were national in nature, such as the pensions and triennial valuation and the impact on our balance sheet, which has meant that further time was required. The other item as well that will come to the meeting next week that ties the statement of accounts up as well is the annual governance statement, which I believe when it came to this committee last June, there was some commentary that needed to be updated. Yeah, so no major changes are expected, and that will come. So next committee for 21-22. That's great news. In terms of the more recent accounts, 22-23, the council has published all that it needed to do. You'll recall again on the council's website to the statutory deadlines that we were given. The public inspection of the accounts as well is complete. And that was over the summer period. The next steps are for the audit to commence next month, so in October, with the aim for Grant Thornton to fully complete the audit, and I am touching wood, by at least the end of the year. So that is the plan as things stand at present. And again, later on the agenda is the audit plan that links with that 22-23 audit.
So just to add to that, on the 2nd of October, we've put some training in your diary. This is for to support you in the sign off of that statement of accounts and the annual governance statement. And we anticipate having a special meeting on October the 31st to sign off the statement of accounts and the annual governance statement for 21-22. And I hope you can all be present for both of those meetings. Kirsty and Andrew have also put together a very helpful little timetable which they'll circulate after this meeting so that you can see when you're expected to do stuff for both the 21-22 and the 22-23 accounts as well, and audit plan. That will be circulated afterwards. Sorry? They added on?
So we're waiting for confirmation from Grant Thornton's that they're available on the 31st of October before invites were sent for the additional meeting. So if I get the all clear from Grant Thornton's, then the invites will go out to all members of the committee.
Okay, sorry, David, I didn't realise that hadn't gone in. Thanks, Hannah. Any questions, Kirsty? No. Okay, so then we move on to item 12, which is the 22-23 external audit plan. I don't know who's taking this. Is it you, Kirsty, or Andrew, or Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I think it will be a combined approach as well. Quite brief from me. So absolutely, we've brought the external audit 22-23 audit plan. So the key areas that external audit are planning to look at with regards to our accounts. This is standard in terms of it's very similar to previous years, and the significant get the terminology, apologies, I've got it open, here we go, significant risks identified, which is quite a catchy title, but it is standard with regards to the audit approach across, I'm looking at Paul, but the audit approach across local government. So you will see very similar risks highlighted and the areas that they'll look at in terms of their audit as well. There is the other part in there is the audit fees as well, which it is worth mentioning, that there has, because of the work that's been extra work that's been done for 21-22 accounts, that is fed through, and it is part of a national consultation at the moment about increasing audit fees quite significantly. I'm perhaps understating that, aren't I?
Very significant.
Okay. So at that point, I'll pause, and Paul, if you have anything further.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take you through the audit plan. So this is the first of 3 reports that you'll receive for the 22-23 financial statement audit. This is the audit plan which sets out the work that we've done to date, planning our audit, what we've identified as our significant risks. The other 2 reports are our audit findings report, which is after the end of the audit, which kind of is the results of the audit. And then there's an annual auditor's report, which is our VFM report, because we have to do a piece of work on value for money. So if I take you through the report, as Kirsty said, the main bit to start with is the significant risks that are on page 13 of the supplementary agenda. The first 3 are under the auditing standards. They are mandated significant risks. So the first one's the fraudulent revenue recognition. So this is looking for assuming that the presumption is that there is fraud in your revenue recognition. This risk can be rebutted if we get a good understanding of the income streams. And in this case, your income streams are fairly straightforward. So we've been able to rebut that as a significant risk, but we need to report it. And along with that, because of the way local government works, income is not your main risk. Your expenditure is your risk, because that's your main driver, and that's the expenditure. So there's a practice note that comes out from CITFA that states that we need to consider whether there is a risk of fraud within that expenditure. Again, we can rebut that or say it's not applicable. And again, in your case, your expenditure for your type of authority is fairly straightforward. So we can say, we understand what your expenditure streams are, and say that's not appropriate. The next one, which kind of sounds a bit scary, is management override of controls. This is a presumed risk that we can't rebut. So we have to assume that management are overriding the controls that you have in place for your financial statements. It's not saying it's happening, but there is a risk that it could, and that's what we've got to look for. So as we set out, we look at the controls. The main area where you can override the controls is through the journals that are posted into the financial system. So we do a lot of work around the journals, making sure that they are gaining understanding of the material ones. What are the risky ones? Are the controls that are in place being followed? So, example, we don't like to see Kirsty posting and approving journals into the system because she's the Section 151 officer. So you would expect the finance team to be doing the day-to-day actions, which is what journals are. The next significant risk is the valuation of land and buildings. Now, there are two large figures within your financial statements. One is land and buildings, and the other one is pension liability. And I'll come on to that one next, because you can guess that there's going to be a significant risk with that one. The valuation of land and buildings, you get an external expert to come in, your valuer to come and value them. It's based on a lot of assumptions. They're very complex assumptions. So there is a risk of a material misstatement in those figures within your accounts. I think for 21-22, the land and buildings that you had valued was £36 million. And that moves every year. You do a 3-year rolling revaluation. So you effectively revalue a third of them every year. And that fluctuates. And if you can think about what's happened in the last 3 years in the economy, that's had a big impact on the valuation, so they can swing. So we need to make sure that what valuations you're carrying in there don't lead to a significant difference in the figure that's in the accounts to what their actual carrying value is. So that's the significant risk. And then finally, the last one is pension liability. This is the biggest figure in your accounts. It was £45 million in 21-22. Again, you have an expert, the actuary, which works for for Leicestershire Pension Fund. It's highly complex. There are lots of estimates. There are lots of assumptions that go into coming up to what your predicted liability is going to be. Therefore, we need to look at it and make sure that it's correct. So then moving on to page 17, our approach to materiality. So with the best will in the world, to gain full assurance over your accounts, we would have to audit 100% of the transactions that went into your accounts. If you think audits take long now, if we had to do 100% audit, it would take us 3 or 4 years to probably get through it all. So that's not a practical way of doing it. So what we do is we set a materiality, and that's to make sure that the accounts are, give a true and fair view of the state of what's happened during the year for the council. So this is normally set on expenditure. So we've set it at approximately 2% of your gross expenditure for the period, which works. We normally base it on the prior year because that's the figures we have when we do our planning. And that comes out at 1.375 million. So that's not too bad. Obviously, large authorities have a bigger figure, small authorities have smaller. But that's what we were working about. And what we will do is, if we find errors or anything, as long as they're below that level, we'll still do some work. But if there are larger errors than that materiality, then we'll have to undertake more audit work to gain the assurance we need to conclude that the accounts give true and fair view. The other thing is we have to consider other areas that are below that materiality, but are by the nature of them are material. So the key ones are around pay. That tends to be the main one. So what we've done is we've set a separate materiality for the officer remuneration disclosures within the accounts. Given the value of that, our materiality for that is £15,000, which seems quite low, but it's the main figures that are reported in there are your senior officer figures. What we tend to find is if we find any discrepancies in that notes, most councils are very keen to correct it and have it accurate. So it doesn't normally pay. So 15,000 compared to 1.375 million seems a big drop, but in most cases, it doesn't really come into play. Moving on, the next bit's around value for money. So our value for money work has already commenced. What we're doing at the moment is we haven't finished the value for money work for 21-22, but we're conscious that a lot of things have moved on since 21-22 because we're now getting towards a year, by 18 months since the end of that period, and what value for money work concentrates on is what happened during that year. So what we're currently doing is a joint report that covers 21-22 and 22-23. So it will kind of say, this is what happened to 21-22, fully recognizing that another year's passed and we can report on that. And what we're intending to do is bring you a joint report for that in December, along with when we bring the audit findings report. So it's more timely, because I don't think with the rest of the world, we can tell you what it was like in 21-22, but how much meaning that actually brings to you now compared to what we can say about 22-23. It's just about time moving on. Then we get on to the next favourite bit of most audit committees is the audit fees. So our proposed fee for this is just over £86,000. Page 24 sets out how we've arrived at that 86 million. 86 million. That would be good. Yes, that would be good. No, 86,000. That would be, wouldn't it? So the starting point is the scale fee that PSAA has published and set out for 22-23. Now this follows the scheme that on the current framework contract, which was issued about 5 years ago. The audit world has moved on and there are lots of extra requirements that we're now required to undertake, which weren't included when that contract was negotiated. And page 24 takes you through it. So there's the value for money work that we do. It was expanded during the past 5 years. That wasn't included in the contract and it's now a significant piece of work. There are also new auditing standards that have come out and accounting standards, so ISO 540 and ISO 315. There's also issues, and we also have our audits are reviewed by the Financial Reporting Council. Their requirements and what they're looking for has put extra pressure on the audit and for us to do additional work. And that kind of ties into the current agenda that's going on about what's the scope of an audit for local government should we be doing some of the work that we're required to do, especially around valuation of land and buildings in a council. That project is going on, but that's driven from the additional quality work that we need to do to satisfy ourselves that the figures in your accounts for those areas are correct. So that kind of takes you through, say, 6,000. I think it's probably a good time to say that 86,000 isn't a bad fee. especially with the new framework contract that's come in, and you'll have seen the commentary from PSAA where they're expecting audit fees to go up by 150%. I was in an audit committee yesterday in a unitary not too far from here, and their audit fees going up from 350,000 to just over £750,000 under the new contract. So they've been informed by PSA. That's their approximation. So PSA are currently going through the process of informing council what their expected scale fees for 23-24 are going to be. So yeah, it's a changing environment. But I'm happy to take any questions on the report, and I will try to answer any that you have on audit, please.
Committee? It's deliberate. Councillor Ross.
I'm conscious of the fact that I know nothing about auditing local authorities. I'll start by saying that. In terms of the fee setting and the role of internal audit, my experience has been that procedural and transaction work is effectively negotiated. It's understood precisely what the scope is of internal audit, and therefore what would be deemed to be interim audit work would therefore be carried out by the external auditor. Is that something that is done, reviewed annually in terms of our fee setting process? I excuse the question, Kirsty, because I know nothing about this, but I'm coming from an industry background. That's what we did as part of the audit fee setting each year.
It's a very good question, as always. Not a straightforward answer, I think, and that's why we're exchanging glances between us.
Sorry, if I wasn't supposed to ask that question.
No, it's not that. So the council has opted into the PSAA. I don't know if Paul's got it there, but it's in effect, we opt into it so that they can procure a tender across. So we'll get some economies of scale across all local authorities. You don't have to opt into it. It is a function that the Audit Commission used to do and was disbanded. So it does hark back to some of those days. But for the council, a decision was made that we would opt into that. So our audit fees are set by that national procurement. With regards to the work that internal audit, and I will hand over, as you said, the interim audit as well. And now I have been at councils where there was an interim audit, and indeed external audit did place assurance on internal audit work. Now at that previous council, that waned and was no longer the case. So you are right. I would say you are right in your approach and thinking. But I don't think it is the position like it used to be in days gone. And I'll look to Paul. And
yeah, I think going back 10, 15 years, we were able to rely on the work of internal audit. The auditing standards pretty much put pay to that, saying that we need to get our own assurances. Internal audit is your function to gain your assurance and feeds into your annual governance statement, but we can't rely on it directly. So that's kind of the separation. But what we do is we pay attention to the work that internal audit do. And if Rachel is highlighting areas where there are poor weaknesses, where there are significant weaknesses, especially around financial systems and controls, that will inform our audit approach and may mean that we need to do more work within that segment. So say, for example, she gave a report that said there were no controls over journals whatsoever. Anybody in the council could go into the financial system and post a journal. Not that happens, but that is a significant issue for our audit, and the amount of work that we would have to do on journals would increase significantly. So we watch to see what comes out of the internal audit and whether that impacts on our audit, but we can't rely directly on the work of internal audit anymore.
Thank you. I'm 12 years away from this, so Shows my age.
Any more from the committee? Councillor Stevenson?
Yes, it is about fees. No, I mean, clearly audit is absolutely essential. It's not our money, it's the public's money that is being spent. And actually the report, it's very clear that it's very thorough. And actually the way you've described the relationship between external and internal is very reassuring in terms of who says the extra bits that need to be done. Where has that come from precisely? Because it feels potentially as though poor old local government is in a sort of lovely cycle of, oh, we think you might be going bust. So the best solution is to do a bit more audit, which we'll charge you for. And it's gone up by 150%, which I don't know if it's helping. And I'm not shooting the messenger. It was just an innocent question.
No, I think there's two parts to that. So for the audit fees, the scale fee is set by PSAA, and any additional fees that we want to charge above that, we have to go to PSAA and say, this is what we have to demonstrate to them. This is the additional work we've had to do. This is what it's cost us. This is what we're proposing to charge. And they kind of go from talking to the council, they agree that fee, and it's a bit of a negotiation. There is some to and fro in getting the evidence. So we just don't say, oh, we're just going to charge X amount, and then we just tell the council, and then you're stuck with it. There was quite a robust challenge from PSAA as part of that framework that they've opted into to agree the additional fees. And I think it's one of those that, if you look at that list of additional things, they just came in over the past 5 years, and they're things that we have to do. A lot of that is baked into the new framework contract that we've recently been negotiating. In terms of the levels of fees, I think 5 years ago, the fees that were set were set too low by the audit firms. And I think there's a general recognition that the fees had dropped too low because they've come down significantly from the time of the audit commission. But there's now this new onus on all this additional work that we've got to do. So they have come up. So that's why in the new framework contract, there's an increase. And that's through that process.
Yeah, sorry to come, but who is it that said that the extra bits that need to be done to give the assurance, the list, is that a government thing? Is that the view of professional auditors that in order to check that you are robust and financially safe? Thank you, very good. Who has decided that, or what has decided that?
So some of that, like the VFM, is under the National Audit Codes. The National Audit Office have said, you need to do this work. This is the scope of the work. The other bits where it's auditing and accounting standards, that's set by the Financial Reporting Council, and that's a worldwide standard that's come in. We have the UK abides by them. So we have to audit to those standards. The other bits around journals testing and payrolls and collections, they come from the inspections from the FRC that are on our work, and the results of them looking at audits and saying, you need to do more in this area. We don't agree with your approach. You need to do this more. But it's not just us. That's across the auditing bodies who look after, who audit local government.
Thank you so much.
Okay, anybody else? No, so the recommendation is just that the committee notes the external audit 22-23 audit plan. Nothing to vote on here. Item 13 is the RIPA report, which I think Angela covered in item 9. So I think we can just move on from that unless anybody's got any questions. No. So item 14 is any other urgent business, and I've not been notified of any other urgent business. Well, sorry.
May I make
Powell?
a comment or ask that question? It's a request for something in a future agenda.
It's not notified under any.
I haven't notified it. Sorry.
No, it's not been notified.
Could you?
Can I just make a comment then?
She's on the edge.
If you want something on a future agenda, we do have an agenda planning meeting, and I suggest that you write to me and we'll feed it into that.
Okay, it was just
that
coming
okay?
arising from the training we had the other evening.
Ah,
you.
I was going to say that after we've closed the meeting, I would like to just see the committee about training. If just for a few minutes, if that's okay. Okay, date of next meeting isn't Tuesday, the 5th of December. It's
No, if it's confirmed with Grant Thornton's that they can be there, then are you available, Paul, for the 31st?
I'm free. I just need to check with whether Laurelin is, but I would probably go with the 31st of October.
Okay.
okay.
So,
So
sorry, yeah, it looks so the special meeting for the statement of account sign off will be the 31st of October. But I'd send the diary invites out tomorrow.
I closed the meeting at 8:38. Thank you. Thank you.